evening and welcome. The September 19th, 2018 meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission is called to order. First item on the agenda is vote minutes. First we have the minutes of August 8th.
Madam Chair, I did read those and I found them to be correct.
All right, is that a motion?
That's a motion.
All right.
Second.
Thank you. A motion is second. Any other comments? All those in favor of adopting the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. So moved. And next we have the minutes of September 12th.
Madam Chair, on page, I made it page 7, but there's a small correction that I will give to, another that I felt they, I had to recuse myself, so I don't know if anybody knew about the order of conditions that were done.
I was absent
Yeah.
on September 12th, so I can't help you.
Because I was not on that forum.
Has
I mean, I
anyone
did
else-
read them, and they,
Officially.
yeah, I officially wasn't there, but they appeared correct.
Okay, does anybody else have any comments on the September 12th meeting? Which hearing was that? Oh, it was-
September 12th.
Okay. Which was the order of conditions, Maury, that you?
I wasn't on all the, I think there were 4 orders of
Oh,
conditions.
okay.
I was not on the quorum for those.
All right.
But I did read them, and they were, from what I was here, I did listen.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of adopting the minutes of September 12th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. All right, next we have request for continuance under a notice of intent. James and Paul DeVellis, 22 Dusty Miller Road, Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to raise RAZE and rebuild the existing house, install Title V septic system, dry wells, and all associated excavating, grading, and landscaping. Jen, do we have a proposed date for the continuance?
Yes, Madam Chairman. They're requesting a continuance until September 26th.
So moved.
I forgot to make my usual announcement or request that people please silence their devices. Sorry, Sam. I'm sorry, September 26th, Jen?
Yes.
Thank you.
So moved. Or is that-
I moved it second.
Oh, I'm sorry, second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
26.
Request for determination of applicability. Jane Furr, 29 Shoreview Avenue, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to pump, fill, and abandon the existing cesspools and upgrade to a Title V septic system. And one second, Jen, I just want to, for the benefit of those in the audience, for a request for determination of applicability, what the applicant would like to hear is a negative determination. This means that they do not have to go to the next level of permit application and review. Jen. Oh, I'm sorry, Brendan.
Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
Thank you.
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I just had one question, Brendan. It says that the H10 tank is gonna be installed behind the house. There's access without cutting things down. Okay, thank you, that's all. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the public on this application? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. All right, great. Request for hearings under a notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. First, request for under a notice of intent, Gracelands by the Sea LLC, 39 Juniper Point Road, Woods Hole, Massachusetts, for permission to renovate the existing single-family house with reconfigured decks, Title V septic system, walkways, steps, retaining walls, parking court, and all associated clearing, excavating, grading, mitigation, planting, and landscaping.
You like that single family?
Good evening, Joel. Ah,
Why are we doing the old school version?
To cover all generations.
all generations, all vision categories.
So this is an existing house that's been here since 1946 or so.
I'm sorry, you need to,
Joel Kubik, with Holmes and McGrath.
thank you.
The existing house, it was recently, it was big of a part of a big estate. It was recently subdivided to create this lot that it's currently on. It's served by a cesspool. What we're proposing to do is put in a new Title V system for it. There's some slight reconfigurations to the decks on the house and some renovations to the interior. The resource areas on or within 100 feet of the work are the coastal bank along Great Pond and Little Harbor. There's a velocity zone along portion of that, so you have the 50-foot setback to the FWR Zone A right there. Another portion is not within the velocity zone, that's a 25-foot setback. And then you see the 100-foot setbacks from those for the Zone B. The work that's being done is the reconfiguration, so there's actually a reduction of structure within the Zone A right here. This deck is being removed and reconfigured. There is an overall increase in the Zone B, but the total of all that is 138 square feet of additional space. I don't remember, I think a few of you were on the board before when this came in, before the subdivisions. There was a proposed Title V system that was gonna be pumped up in here. So there was proposed plantings in this area before. That was approved by the board for that work that was gonna be done. There was a driveway and other walkway changes that were being made for that. But this is a new project, new configuration. So we've got the mitigation area to offset that at the 2-to-1 ratio. There's the most restricted resource buffers. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Joel. Jen or Brendan?
Want to talk about the trees? I think just, Joel, in the area of the proposed walkway, and I've already stated that, I missed it when you and Brendan went out in the field. There are some additional trees and vegetation in that area that need to come down that aren't shown on the plan.
Correct. They are kind of overhanging the deck. I don't see a big problem with them coming down. They're kind of encroaching onto the house. Again, a lot of these trees have been here for eons.
Yeah, I know.
They're huge. So I think those need to come down. We could certainly show that. It's, again, right about where that hand is there, at the end of the steps.
Okay.
But we don't want to do too much, so that little bit could be reconfigured a little bit right there, but I think those steps and just removing that 1 or 2 trees right up there would work for that.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's it. Thank you.
Mark, would you like to start? Sure.
A couple of large trees look like they are slated to come down. Are you familiar with the very large trees?
Which ones are you talking about? There are quite a few on this property and the neighboring properties.
Well, the ones that, like the proposed gravel parking area,
Mhm.
and another one,
Those are outside the conservation jurisdiction.
yeah.
Yeah.
But they are very lovely old trees.
There are a lot of them on this property, and unfortunately, some of those have to come down in order to make this work. Again, it's just a cesspool. It's a very large house with a cesspool. It's about time it got upgraded to what is current requirement there. It's a much bigger system, obviously, and it's got to give somewhere. So that area is going to be a good parking spot for this new configuration of the property. I understand your concern, though.
Okay. No further questions.
Thank you, Peter. Steve?
I don't have any questions.
All right. Jamie?
I don't either.
Maury?
The only question I had was the same as Peter. Is there any way you could swing? I know it's out of our jurisdiction, but those trees might be very beneficial for them, for shade and just the beauty of them, that they could just swing that leach field.
Well, there's just, I mean, it's something we've looked at.
Okay.
There's grading issues, there's setback issues. I mean, we've shoehorned that thing
Okay.
in. It's
They're
the
gonna-
smallest
they're gonna
system we
miss
could
'em.
put in there. We looked at it, we tried.
Okay, thank you.
Well, she answered the only question of any interest in this.
Courtney?
No questions.
All right.
I'm making a move to close
Take it
and
on the vote.
Susan, we just had a motion from Jamie.
a second.
Thank you. All right, anything else from the board?
I have small copies. if you want.
Any questions or comments? Yes, Mark?
I think the trees, there was an issue about some of the trees right next to the proposed walkway and stairway. There could be an issue with the, is that mark 100 feet on your map? That's 50 feet, so that's the Zone A.
Zone A from the coastal bank is right there. Is that what
right?
you're
So
looking?
in the next zone in,
That's
there
Zone
was
B.
a lot of cedars right next to the house.
Right.
From the back deck going down the stairs. And I think there's a possibility you were gonna move those stairs a little bit?
So these, if you've been to the site, these are kind of tucked away.
Pardon me?
These exist, these stone steps right here, these first ones off the lawn, they're kind of tucked away. It hasn't been maintained, but there was an old walkway that went from this back deck down to the driveway where it was before. It's really overgrown. The stairs are there. You kind of have to,
Can I
I have some pictures of
Point
it.
at
if you-
the chart?
Absolutely.
talking about this stairway,
Correct.
this old stairway, and these stones are there.
Yes,
There's a big clump of cedar right in here.
correct.
And you're going right through that. You might wanna just move it out 6 or 8 feet. You wouldn't have to cut down all those trees, they're
Yeah,
big, beautiful,
they're,
view blocking on purpose. Just thinking, tweak up the design of it.
understood. Yeah, we're gonna look at trying to save as many of those as we can. They are pretty close to the house, but you're right, there are some benefits to having them there.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
All right, any questions or comments from the public before we take the vote? All right. All those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
What a problem.
Next. Stephen Washakowski, 42 Rivers Edge Road, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to construct and maintain a 117-square-foot deck addition and spiral stairway, garage addition, rinse station, and all associated excavating, grading, and landscaping.
It's gonna take some getting used to not being able to bring the plans, Joel. Like, safety.
Keep them back here.
Thank you.
Again, Joel Kubik with Holmes and McGrath. So this property is on River's Edge Road, along Childs River, on the north side of 28. It's an existing house. There's a 200-foot riverfront, which is the limit of your jurisdiction. There's a proposed additional garage bay that's being proposed up in the north side of the house here. The existing garage is right there. And an extension to the existing deck off of the back is the increase in impervious area that we're gonna be mitigating for down along the edge of the existing plantings. This is mostly lawn, mowed area. There are some trees spread out throughout it. The coastal bank is the closest resource area, the 50-foot Zone A, and the 100-foot Zone B cuts through. So that deck extension, which is detailed down here for you, is the area that's actually the increase. There's a rinse station that's also being proposed over here. The roof dry wells are gonna go into the roof drainage is gonna go into a dry well on the side of the house over there. There's an existing kayak rack that's down in the in the wetland. That's gonna be moved up above the coastal bank, which is also just about the ACEC boundary. So that is gonna be moved up along here, and they'll just have to carry those kayaks down this mulch path down to the water's edge to use those. No other real concerns here, but I'd be happy to answer questions that you have.
Thank you. Jen? Courtney? Kevin?
Minor point here, in the area of the mitigation plantings, is that the proposed tree?
Correct. There's an existing tree that's there,
Yeah,
and there's the circle right next to that is the cedar tree that's
okay.
being proposed.
The only reason I was concerned is because I didn't think it matched the proposed tree in your planting notes. The symbol, that's all.
Might be a little smaller, but I see your concern, yeah. That's where it's intended to be, is within that planting area right down there.
Pardon?
That tree, the proposed tree, is intended to be right in that planting area down there where that circle
No,
is.
that's fine, that's fine.
All set?
All set.
Maureen?
I just had one question. Where you're planning the proposed mitigation, where you're taking out the kayak rack, that area along that path is pretty void of anything? And to fill that in so that's actually closer to the resource than where you're proposing it? You know that little bump out where the kayak rack is now?
Is currently, yeah,
Yeah, and there's that, I'm just afraid that it's just gonna continue to be mowed
kept
and,
as used.
yeah.
No, we've never
Mowed that.
where the kayak rack is.
Sir, I'm sorry, you need to identify yourself and come up to the.
I'm sorry, I'm the property owner, Steve Washikowski. We've never mowed that area where the kayak rack is. That's been a void down there since we moved in 2014. So that's why my daughters moved the rack down into that spot. So,
Well, maybe without the foot traffic and the use, that's a no-touch zone. So it'll just probably revegetate itself on its own if it's not,
I
Third?
would assume so.
okay.
You know.
Well, we'll put it in the order. Thank you.
All set?
That's it.
All right. Janie?
I have nothing.
Steve?
No questions. No questions.
Mark?
Yes, if you look at your drawing here, there's these diagonal lines which are measuring the distance from various features to the house. Why don't you go for a permit for vista pruning for that area? It's already been cleared out a little bit, you know, some branches have been cut down. I don't know when, could have been years ago, but I don't understand why we just don't get a permit at the same time. It'd be easy enough to put it in, and then it'd be done forever, and we wouldn't have to deal with it 5 years from now. And it just takes drawing a line on the map and say Vista corridor. I don't know what the other members of the committee think.
It's certainly an acceptable idea. Perhaps they don't want to go to the expense at this time of doing the vista pruning, I don't know. Maybe they don't want a
Staff
vista
would be
pruning.
uncomfortable
pretty
to put a
clear.
vista window on the plan at this time, since we have not had an opportunity
Yeah,
to review
right.
it. It's something an applicant can always do, Mark, but with putting it on
Here
right now,
they've got an
without,
architect drawing
without your
lines.
staff going out there and evaluating it.
Yeah, well,
I get what you're saying, it's a good idea, but if the board wanted to do that, that's fine, but I would just feel uncomfortable from a staff level
okay,
Yeah.
approving something without reviewing it.
I don't have anything else.
Thank you.
I make a motion to close the hearing, take it under advisement.
So we had 2 seconds. Did you get that, Susan? Any other questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? All those in favor of closing the hearing say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. All right, James and Paul DeVellis, 22 Justy Miller Road. This has been continued to September 26th.
Oh, I have a form for that.
And moving on to
It was last week, though, right?
continued request for a hearing under a notice of intent. Wigwam Sipawicit Trust, 8 Wigwam Road, West Falmouth, Massachusetts. Request to amend the existing order of conditions DEP 25-3590 to reconfigure the existing driveway, to relocate the existing beach access sand path more north, and to replant the old path, to authorize existing after-the-fact modifications, including installation of stone landing at southwest corner of the house, reconfiguration of the main entry landing, installation of utilities on raised platforms, approve proposed planting revisions, and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping.
Madam
Now,
The
Chairman,
quorum
Yeah.
is Mark, Peter, Jamie, Maury, and Kevin.
All right, and as I did in the last round of this hearing, I am not on the quorum, but I will just sit here and moderate the,
Keep us in check.
yes, keep the traffic going.
really, Mike, the first plan you put up there is crooked. Oh, there you go. Only you like it. Thank you,
Sorry,
Joel.
I'm all thumbs, and I still can't text.
These all thumb drives. Never mind.
I'm used to giving you your own copy, so I'm
That's
going-
fine.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike. Mike, even with this new system, if you have a colored version, you do need to bring us a hard copy of that,
Thank you,
okay?
thank you. I'm not on the quorum, though.
He has
If you don't have
plenty.
enough.
He has plenty.
When we go to this, if you have a colored version, you need to bring us a copy.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I know, thank you.
My name is Michael McGrath. I'm a registered engineer and professional inspector. I work for Holmes and McGrath, and my firm prepared the plans and a notice of intent. The original thought of the project was to address and provide all the complete mitigation, plus the plan shows that the proposed relocated drive and turnaround. And so we continued the hearing for a bunch of issues. We were asked to modify the mitigation plantings, and there's a second exhibit that I'll hand out right now that we have to have several different types of mitigation plantings. And so what we did, the second exhibit sort of clarifies what's shown on this plan. And the bottom line is that we had to provide some mitigation plantings for a landing that was built bigger than expected, and that they built the lawn between the house and the dune. The lawn is wider than what was shown, and the reason was that they have continually replaced some of the trees on the south side of the site. And the reason they have done that is the commission's order required pretty large trees, and they keep dying. So they've even built a seasonal windscreen to try and keep the trees, but they have replaced several other trees that are on the south side along in there. So we've had to provide the commission with a calculation that shows that we have enough, basically offsets on the entire site for not only that work, but when we move the proposed driveway, as is shown on the plan, we have to make up the differences in the plantings. So there's a letter accompanied by a graphic that shows you in different colors how we got there. We are counting the dune that's colored in yellow here, and we're counting a portion of the vegetated dune that's basically parallel with the beach as part of it. We're filling in a path that runs between the house and the dune. There is a access way that they built that runs between the area that's parking down to the beach, and we're showing that to be filled with beach grass. It's understood that if we need to do maintenance or provide more sand, that we will alter that and then replant it again. So that's why we used beach grass. There's some areas on the other side of the parking lot that is going to be vegetated. Down at where the old cul-de-sac is, there is a, colored in yellow, is a basically an elevated platforms that contain, there's an electric transformer, there's a generator, there's elevated utilities there. And some of those utilities been altered without your approval, so we're making up the plantings that are included in there. So the current access is off the old cul-de-sac and is sort of a J, and we're gonna fill that in with vegetation. There's a very short new path that we're gonna propose, and around the base of one of the elevated structures, we are gonna put in beach grass. So we're gonna fill in down by the new cul-de-sac, all up with new plants, and we're going to revegetate an area that used to be part of the driveway. You asked me a bunch of questions, and I think that the letter we did describes everything. DEP adopted emergency regulations that allowed the placement of sand, and at the north end of the site, when you go out, if you start the parking and go out towards the upper left-hand portion of the plan, there's an area that's shaded in green, and that is the top of some sand that was put in pursuant to the emergency declaration after Winter Storm Riley. It was authorized by an emergency declaration. We built 1,250 square feet. And it turns out this dune is, it turns out it has an unexpected positive impact in that in May of this year, I went out to the site and I saw a cluster of plovers. There were some pipe and plovers, and they were clustered at the base of the beach nourishment. And when I talked to Mass Audubon, who are the monitors that monitor the piping plover, at that time they told me that the piping plovers like beach nourishment, and I saw it from my own eyes. Unfortunately, over the summer, there was the beach is in the process of retreating. The commissioners that have been here a while know that I've given you a graphic that shows that that beach is retreating, and Buzzards Bay has come up a whole foot in the last 3 or 4 years. The problem we have here is that there is only a narrow beach compared to the historic width of the beach, and over the summer, there was a storm that basically they lost all the pipe and plover chicks. So that's very unfortunate. but unfortunately, I don't know how to fix that. This is in a special area. We couldn't alter the beach to save the pipe and plover, unfortunately, under all the different regulations. But in any case, one of the questions was whether or not the dune that's in this area is a real dune. And we did file some written testimony from LEC Environmental Consultants that supports the value and the wildlife habitat. The owner notices that there is wildlife in that dune, and LEC has written an opinion that Mark Manganello is here if you want him to describe it. So I think that we have proposed all of the required plantings, and we're looking for an approval that allows us to move this driveway and put in all the required plants. I'm here to get, Mark, would you come up and just talk quickly about the value of this dune, please?
Thanks. I actually wasn't here to speak on this matter, but I did see the report. It was done by Stan Humphreys, who's a coastal geologist in my office, so.
Mark, could you just identify yourself?
Oh, yes, sorry. Mark Manganello from LEC Environmental Consultants. So the analysis Stan did resulted in a conclusion that this dune does function similar to a natural dune and does have wildlife habitat characteristics similar to a natural dune based on its location, its soil composition, the plant community there, and its habitat connectivity up and down the beach area. So that's really it in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right,
I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
thanks, Mike. Jim?
The only thing I wanna say is, the board will have to decide if the mitigation is sufficient, given the analysis that was provided. Mike, at the last hearing, Mr. Gurney wanted you to replace that beach grass along the parking area, so where you have the word parking, where the path you're filling in, you have that thin strip of beach grass along the roadway.
Right.
The last hearing, Mr. Gurney asked you to kind of make that more woody plants.
And I just stated that the reason that we want to leave it as beach grass is that that would be the vehicular access if we need to bring more sand out or do any maintenance on the beach.
No, not along the path, along the skinny little part. Where you have the word parking, the little yellow thin line.
Oh, on the opposite side of the
Yeah.
street?
I understand why
You
you're
can-
doing the beach grass on the construction access side, I'm fine with that. But I think, Mark, wasn't it that other side that you had asked?
Oh, I was thinking about it, but I agree that you gotta have access to heavy vehicles to get the sand out, because that stuff's washing away even as we sit
Well,
here.
no, I know that, but I thought you had meant on the other side. If you're fine with it, then I'm fine with it. I'm okay. That's all, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Oh, I forgot to say one thing, is that one of the commissioners asked me, at one time, there was a row, on one of the plans showed a row of cedars adjacent to the driveway, and they are there, they're completely encased in vegetation, but they're there and they do exist.
Okay, Mark, did you have anything else?
No comments.
Peter?
No questions.
All right, Jamie?
Thanks for sticking with it. I'm good.
My job.
Maureen?
I just had a couple questions. What is that line where you're gonna propose to transplant the 5 cedars that are in the cul-de-sac turnaround? What is the hash mark to the property line? What is that little strip?
Well, there's a 5-foot strip that was acquired a long time ago, and we're trying to show it being merged, so. In other words,
So that belongs to this property?
belongs to this
Okay,
property.
just wanna make sure.
Oh, well, the other thing is that I had shown before that there was some vegetation here that wasn't planted, but it has been planted. It was all filled in.
Okay, it is all filled in. All right, so the next question, Mike, on these plans, it would really be helpful if you put a legend of what the trees are and the plants and things like that. It just makes it easier for us to Because in all of this, you just keep saying mitigation, restoration, planting, but we really don't have any idea what they're gonna be. If it's gonna be beach plum, bayberry, winterberry, so it'd be nice just to know what you were proposing, and especially underneath the area of removed understory, because that's, I think whoever's gonna be doing this needs to know what plant species would live under there where it was all mowed down.
Right, what we're talking about is, I should have brought a pointer. Joel's not here. There's an area that was full of poison ivy, and one of the owner's grandchildren got into it, so he had the poison ivy removed. So there's an area where there's trees, but there's no ground cover.
Right.
And actually what's happening is things are taking over in.
Right, but you're proposing to restore it, so I'm asking you, how are you restoring that, besides just letting it grow? I mean, if you're gonna just let it grow naturally, and it all comes back, but if it's poison ivy, and that was one of the things why they cut it, I just don't want them to go back in and cut it, because, I don't know, that's your call, but I know that was your concern before. There was, Jen, I remember in the old plans, way back from like '09,
I have them all here.
okay,
Big box.
there was mitigation planting, I think, where the ornamentals are, by the door. Betsy brought that up, remember?
Oh, we did look at that, actually.
Yeah. So,
If you're talking between the garage door and the stoop, there's a steep bank, that's all inkberry.
That's all what, Mike?
Inkberry.
okay. We'll check that. And the proposed turnaround, where you're gonna transplant those existing cedars that are already burlapped and bald, which should make it easier. My question is, they're only, I think, if my scale is correct, the trunk of the tree is only about 3 feet off the turnaround. So I just wanna know if there's a better place to put those trees. It's gonna be really tight. Those are good, established, beautiful cedar trees right now, and they're in a very good habitat. But once you cut that out, now you're giving them, I think it was 2 feet, maybe 3. And I don't know how a cedar of that size can grow to its natural size and not be pruned because it's gonna be on the other guy's property. It actually probably will be before you transplant them. Yeah, it's 3 feet. The center of the tree is 3 feet off. So they only look like little black dots, but those are beautiful big cedars that you're transplanting. The ball itself will be bigger than that dot. So,
I can move the proposed transplanted trees so they're now more where the old turnaround is, because there's plenty of space there.
in where the mitigation is?
Yes.
All right, so then where are you gonna give more mitigation when you put the dots on top of the dots?
Only in Falmouth have you described that moving a cedar tree is it's not mitigation? It's not mitigation plants?
Yes, it is. No, I'm not disputing that. I'm saying if you're going to put them, you're gonna put them in the restoration planting of 270 square feet, is that where you're putting it?
There's a 620 square feet that's over,
Yes. By the 70 square feet. There are 2 of them. One's restoration.
We have an area here, I can put at least 3 of them in there, and I'll find another spot.
So what I'm saying is then the mitigation calculations of the woody indigenous plantings you're proposing are now not going to be there because the cedar tree is going to be there. So where are you going to put those plants?
So what I understand you're saying is that if I put a cedar tree in there, it's got 8-foot diameter, I have to take out 4 squared times pi, 48 square feet for every one of those trees, and add it someplace? Where's this stuff come from? That's like voodoo to me.
It's, whenever you put a tree, you have a circle around the tree without mitigation plantings directly underneath the drip line of the tree. It's not calculated in the mitigation planting. That is standard practice that we've had forever for mitigation planting. I don't say you have to move the cedar trees. I am just saying that if you do plant them there, will they be, the canopy will be on the neighbor's property. The root balls, as you just said, are 48 square feet for the total of them, and then you look at the scale, it's 4.5, 5 feet. It's 5 feet from the edge of that driveway to the property line. So you just admitted that the ball itself is already that big. So I'm just asking you how you're gonna do it, so that the survivability of the trees, the logic that they're there, if there's a better place, then put them in a better place. That's just all I'm asking. And it's not voodoo, we do it every week.
I'll find a suitable place to put the transplanted trees in an undisturbed area like I'm showing, so.
In an undisturbed area, so you're gonna take out
You're just saying to
vegetation?
me that,
I guess that's the problem with this lot, there isn't very much room to put anything that needs to be mitigated for.
it's only about 16 acres.
I
and the
understand that.
The only portion that's developed is a very small part, so you're looking at tenths of a percent compared to the total area of the lot. So, I understand what you're saying is that we have to find a home for at least 5 of the trees.
It's convenient to put them where you put them, I'm just concerned of the viability of them. That's all.
Thanks, Maureen. Kevin?
No questions.
All right, I think that's everybody in the forum, yes? Do I have a motion?
I make a
Make a motion
motion.
to close the hearing, put it under advisement.
Second.
All right. Anything else from members of the forum?
We did need a PLS stamp on the plan.
Mike, I need you to stamp the plan for me. I don't think I have one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the public on this application? All right, all those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
7 times a charm.
All right, next, continued hearing. James Kerrigan, 28 Ashley Drive, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to construct new single-family dwelling with usual appurtenances, new Title V septic system, and associated landscaping, filling, and grading. Applicant also requests a variance from the Falmouth Wetlands bylaw to use the historic top of the coastal bank rather than the current top of the coastal bank.
My name is Ken Rydell. I'm with the firm Jack Francis Hall. This project, that's the previous project, ask you to,
Excuse me, Madam Chairman, I don't, sorry, and I just wanted to close this because I
Sure.
don't want the,
Sure.
I'm pretty sure the TV land is picking that up.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so
Thank
Ken,
you.
sorry, I just missed that, I'm just, going to close out those plans, so we're just gonna do that real quick, and then you can.
so the project is 28 Ashley
Do you
Drive.
wanna know what the plan is?
What we're proposing, after proposing a house, Title V septic system, driveway to dry well. Mr. Colley was here August 22, I think it was, to present on the project. At that time, the commission had several questions about the project. They wanted a copy of the subdivision plan. We provided that to the commissioners. Subdivision was recorded in 1967. They also requested a copy of the deed of the present owner, which we provided. That deed was recorded in 1989. They also had questions about the
The new
Commonwealth of Massachusetts project here to create a boat trailer parking area turnaround. The original filing was in 2009, then they filed an amendment in 2014. Oh, you also requested us to submit a revised plan showing the focus here, which we have done.
Thank you.
We met with the staff several times about the revised plan that was approved to the meeting and changed. The original plan showed a restoration area along the So reconfigured it to this triangular area. It would be a more effective buffer than buffer along the whole area. We also show additional mitigation planning here. This lot is heavily wooded to the east side of the proposed house. This is about as much mitigation planning as we can get on the lot without taking down the existing wood. We met with the staff about the revised plan, location of the historic copper plant, the A zones for the resource areas and the B zones. And I believe Jen will agree that she's in agreement with the location of those lines as shown on the plan. So I believe that's the project as we've presented it. Any questions?
Thank you, Ken. Jen?
Yeah, we met with, this office multiple times to review the plans, the staff is fine.
Okay, thank you. Can we just read out the form? Thank
The
you.
quorum
I'm
is
sorry about
Peter, Steve, Jamie, Mary, Maury, and Kevin.
All right, Peter.
According to my notes, the applicant has covered everything in the notes, so no further questions.
Steve?
I'm not on the list.
Form.
You can still comment, though.
We haven't decided that. I'm going to bring that up at the end of the meeting. I mean, we haven't gotten our council's advice on that.
Yes, thank you for the adjustments to the plan. I appreciate them, and I have no other questions.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you. I have no questions either, but I have a new request about site plans, but as far as I'm concerned, we don't need to update this one for this project, but going forward, it would be very helpful, and most of the engineers do this, if when there's a revision, you include a note indicating what the revision addresses.
You want a text on the?
Yeah, just, a phrase, just something to identify it. But that's for future practice. And other than that, thank you
Okay.
for the changes you've made.
No questions. Thank you for doing all the things we asked you to do.
No questions. All right.
I make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Before you close, I just want to make a comment that the applicant is facing a deadline to make a decision whether to go forward with purchasing the lot or not. So we're asking that you close the meeting tonight and vote to approve the project as presented.
I've already informed the office that it's not the practice of this board to vote in order of conditions the same night as you close it.
Right, and it's also not on the agenda.
We're not asking you to vote in order of conditions, okay, tonight, but just give us an indication of whether the project is going to be approved by the commission, so you can make a decision whether to go forward with the purchase or not.
Well, that's deliberation, that's tantamount to voting. I believe we're closing the hearing, however.
I don't think you've heard anything, Ken, at this point to indicate that this board has any concerns with the way the project is currently designed. I hope that can put your client's concerns to rest, but I don't see any indication or any questions that would lead, at least the staff to believe that the commission is, at this point, has any outstanding concerns with your project.
Is it possible that it could be voted next week?
Yes, absolutely.
So I request that it be voted next week if at all possible. Thank
We
you.
can accommodate that, Ken.
Thank you.
All right.
I made a motion.
Okay,
I'll second it.
thank you. Is there anything from the public before we vote on this to close? All right, all those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Susan speaking.
You can see the
Next, Stephen and Susan Moore, 125 Little Neck Road, West Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to improve the existing driveway, install reinforced turf, install stone drainage swales, ongoing maintenance of the existing subsurface irrigation system, after-the-fact approval of the existing shed and ramp, mitigation plantings under FWR 1018, buffer restoration plantings under FWR 1039, and landscaping.
Form for this, Madam Chair, is
It-
Peter, Steve, Jamie, Mary, Maury, and Kevin.
Thank you.
Jen, I don't know how to update these.
And you did have your stamp, right?
Pardon?
You did have your stamp.
Yes, I did.
You did have your stamp.
You
I
didn't share.
corrected.
Not if you keep doing it.
Okay, first of all, you need to be able to see the screen. You're asking really the wrong person on the phone. I think it's this one. Where's your little drive?
Oh,
Is that it?
here's my list.
Oh, well, did Joel already put him in the folder for you? Oh, yeah, he did, right there. Okay, yes. Oh, now this is beyond me. So Jamie,
And it doesn't move.
I know, hang on.
I put white out over that. Wow.
Wait a minute.
It's upside down. Let's
Flip
close
that.
it.
Wait a minute, no, I got it.
I don't remember there was anything all that.
Is that right?
Look at that, huh?
Wow, looks good.
There you go, Mike.
Can you blow it up a little bit?
No problem.
A good secretary.
Wise guy.
It's impressive, Mike.
I was able
Take it away, Mike.
Beside
I
himself.
put white out on this one, but it doesn't show up there. All right. Good evening. My name is Michael McGrath. I am a registered engineer and professional land surveyor. And my office of Holmes and McGrath filed a notice of intent, and we had a previous hearing, and this hearing's been continued. And accompanying me tonight is Attorney Brian Wall. And what we've done is we filed a written letter, and it's also, and then Brian Wall has filed a written letter. So there is a, oh, wow, I didn't know there was a pointer here.
That's not a pointer, Mike. That just advances the slides in the PowerPoint. That's not a pointer,
It won't
Mike.
do
It was,
anything.
it pointed for a second.
I know, but it doesn't show up on the screen, Mike. You can point to the wall if you'd like, but that's not gonna do anything. That's not
This is
gonna
the
help you.
disadvantage
Found
of
the
colored
whiteout.
charts. The pointer won't show up.
I mean, I'm trying here.
I love computers. Thank you.
Use the little mouse, Mike, the little pointer on the mouse.
What? There's a pointer on the mouse?
Yeah, see, there you go.
There is? Where is it?
Just was there.
Saw something move. There it is. It's way up top.
On the right.
Just use your finger, Mike.
All right.
We're trying.
One of the first issues was that there is a septic field that's on, I just can't, all right. And one of the commissioners said we shouldn't be showing required plantings over the septic leaching field, so we have reconfigured it. We have increased the square foot of the proposed DCPC plantings to 1,100 square feet. And they, there was a recommendation that we change the location of our plantings, but we have, under FWR 10.396C1, the placement of such plantings is at the discretion of the applicant. So, so we have put the plants where the applicant has chosen. You also suggested we put a drainage swale in. Right now, there's an isolated wetland that is finger-like, long and narrow. It's separated from a bigger wetland to the west by some upland. And we had shown basically waterways that were of stone, and we've made them much smaller, and we put them all on the upland. And they are a place where the existing runoff just flows over the surface, and we're putting it in two different isolated areas. So on that side, there, in the sort of the yellow-green, there was an RDA that at least the commission thought was a little too aggressive. So where it says proposed native plantings, we're proposing to put plants in to restore the area that was basically partially cleared. Then between that and the driveway, there's like an orange pie-shaped piece, and that's mitigation plantings of 70 square feet. There's also proposed DC plantings. I'm sorry, I should talk once more about mitigation plantings. There's also 150 square feet of proposed mitigation plantings that's basically southwest of the house. Those mitigation plantings make up for the existing shed that was bigger than what was applied for under a previous permit. And then we have proposed DCPC permits that are, there's two behind the existing shed, two different triangular areas. There's one over by the proposed mitigation plantings, and then there's a whole band that runs up from basically the east side of the house all the way up to the street. And I believe that those plantings meet your requirements for restoration, mitigation, and the DCPC regulations. The DCPC regulations have a formula that basically say you're supposed to restore a certain percentage every time you get a permit, and that's what we're doing here. So I believe that we have addressed everything, and there's an existing subsurface irrigation system, and we propose to maintain it as described and supported, and a note's been added to the plan. So we also, I believe that Brian Wall wrote a letter of opinion. I think he should present that. Brian, will you come up?
For the record, Brian Wall, representing the applicant with Holmes and McGrath. The plan shows the calculations. As the commission has interpreted the DCPC regulations, they're to be separately applied and cumulatively applied so that you have to meet both the 1018 requirements and the 1039 requirements. And there are 219 square feet required for 1018, which are shown on the plan. We're proposing 220. And there's 1,030 required to meet the DCPC requirements, and the applicant rounded that up to 1,100. So we believe that the regulations are both separately and independently satisfied.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, the staff has been involved with this project where they were originally the ones that had put the stop work on the project because of the way the RDA plantings were handled. I originally was a little confused on the plan. Mike, just to clarify, the little orange part in between the wetland and the driveway, that's not included in any of your mitigation calculations. That's just the restoration buffer plantings to kind of restore what was gonna happen under the RDA, correct? That area up there, Mike. We're gonna have to find some way for people to point to a plan.
We need an old-fashioned big long plan.
I know, but I'm afraid somebody's gonna smash into the
That's true,
screen.
yeah.
So that's not part of the mitigation or the DCPC calculation. It's the
That's
orange
part of
part.
the mitigation for the shed and the proposed turf.
No, I know, the hash mark one, I'm talking about the orange.
The big long strip.
The big long, I know, I'm pretty confident that
Oh,
it's.
no, what, there's one, see the highlighted yellow proposed, I'm sorry, see it says proposed native plantings, that's the area that I described was aggressively
Yes, yes,
cut
okay,
more.
okay.
And we're
I just wanted to
replanting.
clarify that. Okay.
Yes.
I thank you for moving the DCPC plantings from above the septic system. I appreciate that. Staff doesn't generally like to see plants over a leach field, so I appreciate you reconfiguring that area. The only outstanding issue I can see is the ornamentals that were planted along Little Neck Bars Road. That was done, that was not in accordance with the plan that was submitted to this office. I just want to make that clarifying point. So it'll be up to the board if they want to allow those more ornamental type plantings along the road as a screening. Okay?
And with a new plan, updated plan?
No, he has it on the plan. It just
Okay.
says landscape ornamental plantings
Yeah,
on his
okay.
plan. When we originally got the RDA,
Right.
that area was supposed to be a mix of, and this is what we approved and recommended to the board because this is what was on the plan, to be planted with beach plum, blueberry, and winterberry, and that's, there's additional ornamentals out there. So it'll be up to the board to allow those, but those aren't being included in any of the calculations,
All right.
so that'll be up to the board.
Right.
That's it.
Just had a brief comment about what Jen raised. The ornamental plantings are very important to the applicant because this particular property is at the end of the road and the Shining Path bikeway is right there. And what happens is, in the summertime, when it's used heavily, the public uses Little Neck Bars Road to get to the beach. And without some sort of defining barrier at the front of the yard, members of the public kind of wander over, walk with their dogs, et cetera. And so what the applicant is trying to do is to create a buffer area, not to use that term, a shielding type of defining barrier to keep the public in the road off the property. And as Jen said, none of those plantings are included in any of the calculations. It's just extra planting that the applicant wants to do. Thank you.
I think the Shining Path is a group in Peru.
Is it what?
A group in Peru.
I do, I'm,
Just,
no, the funny thing is, I do so much work in Falmouth, but I live in the Lower Cape, so I'm used to the Cape Cod Rail Trail. Did I misname it?
Shining Sea Bike
What did I
Way,
call
I
it?
think it's called, maybe Bike Path, but
I stand corrected, I'm
it's a
sorry.
notorious group in Peru called the Shining Path.
Oh,
Anyway.
right, is that what I said? I'm sorry. I'll just call it the bike path.
Yeah,
The bike
okay.
path is there, and it's a big issue for the applicant. It's extremely important to them. It's one of the reasons why I'm involved to begin with. So I would ask the board to note that the regulations are satisfied in other areas, and this is voluntary planting that the applicant would like to do. Thank you.
Thank you. So serious. Okay, let's see. Kevin.
No questions.
Maureen.
I just had two, Mike. In our past notes, it was recommended that there were, that we don't have direct spillways into wetlands. Kind of goes against our regulations of discharge into wetlands. And my major concern is the runoff from that lawn that is chemigated, because there are yellow signs on it. So I'm just afraid that runoff is gonna go into that spillway right into the wetland. And I really appreciate the buffer plantings there, they've looked really nice, the new ones in the orange, like, long piece. But if they would just pitch the driveway away from the wetland and put a swale in, because we discussed that at the last meeting, would be very helpful. At least it could maybe contain some of the runoff instead of it all going down that driveway. It's inevitable. I mean, you drive on a driveway, you've got to, it compacts, and eventually it's not pervious anymore, it's impervious. And that was my major concern in the first hearing, and it still is a concern. The other one was the plantings up by the house that you added, the native shrub planting for DCPC calculations. That's 6 feet from the house, and I don't know, we usually want it 10. And there's plenty of room for you to, move it around, maybe at the end of the driveway a little bit more. But that one corner, and we are pretty standard on the 10-foot off for. where the little yellow, right here.
Oh,
Maybe add them to the kind of boat out area near where the ornamentals are, Mike, just add them in there.
Well, I was even,
Up by the road or something.
Yes.
and the other thing I was thinking, Mike, after, listening to your first, discussion, and actually Mr. Wall right now, with the influx of people in the summer, and that is a very busy road, and it is tough to be private in that area without putting some kind of screening up, and can commiserate with that, that maybe some of that native planting can be, you have it at the end by the leach field on the road, that the others, it would be bookended with native plants, and that little piece there, that mitigation amount, could just come up the driveway a little bit, and it would actually give them more buffer to the people that they're concerned about, and it would be closer to the resource. And it would serve three concerns all at once. But other than that, I think they did a nice job with the putting the plants behind the shed, filling in back there and adding. And I think other than that, you pretty much did everything we asked, except, like I say, that 6 foot off the house and the spillways are still a concern.
If I could speak, one of the things that we sometimes do is, well, let's put it this way. I think you know that I have a background in the treatment of water, and any place that you get a significant bacterial population, and you'll get the removal of some of the contaminants. So I look at that this wetland is all by itself. It's not connected to anything else, and I don't really see any harm in discharging runoff into it because it will provide treatment. I realize that we don't do it all the time, or we discourage it, but I think it's an appropriate thing in the long run, especially for a small wetland like this.
Well, one of the problems, Mike, is that they actually put a berm in there for the plantings. They raised the elevation along the edge of the driveway on the wetland side by about, 9 to 12 inches to do the plantings. And now what it's done is it's actually made a sluiceway through there. There's no sheeting off none of those mitigation plants are gonna take up any of the water that runs off because there's a berm. They're prevented from taking up water, and I think you're right, they take up nutrients and whatever, but they can't, because that runoff from that lawn, which is chemigated, will go down that driveway, sheet off, and go directly into the wetlands. So that's why I'm recommending that maybe that buffer planting that's at the corner of the house be put down there to capture some of the runoff from that lawn into the driveway, which would help keep some of the runoff into that wetland.
Well, when we looked at
Good
the
idea.
depth to groundwater, there's very little depth to groundwater, and we thought if we create a swale on the other side, it would be wet all the time.
Well, I know, I looked at the perk for the septic system.
Pardon me?
I looked at the perk test for the septic system as well, so I know where groundwater is.
Groundwater is pretty, there's hardly any depth to groundwater, especially if there's a wetland there, you know that the wetland is where the groundwater is. So we didn't want to create a new wetland on the opposite side of the driveway, to be blunt.
Well, I don't think you're gonna create a wetland. I think if you just have the buffer plantings there away from where they're too close to the house, then you've done what a buffer is supposed to do. So anyway, that's all. We can deliberate on that thank you.
Okay, Jamie? Steve, you're not on this.
No.
You are, sorry. Yes.
I don't have any questions, but
Okay.
thank you, I am. Thanks
Peter.
for responding.
I have no questions.
All right.
The more I could put
Thank you.
that file.
Please move that file.
Yeah, just last if you don't.
Do I have-
I make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second?
All right. Anything else from the board? Any other comments from the public or the applicant? Right, hearing none. All those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Next, Mark and Cynthia Albers, 177 Fay Road, Woods Hole, Massachusetts, for permission to install approximately 170 linear feet of a fiber roll system, restore a coastal bank, manage invasive plants, and nourish the existing beach.
Yes, Madam Chairman, this hearing was continued to the submittal we were waiting for natural.
Mike wants to learn how to shut his little area down before he leaves.
Yeah, we're all gonna have to get used to that.
So we continued this hearing just for the submittal of the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program letter. We have received that. They've determined the project will not result in a take of rare species. So
And there are no other outstanding,
there were no other outstanding issues, but the applicant's representatives are here in case the board had any additional questions.
all right.
I make a motion to close and take it under advisement.
Second. You had a question over here.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly.
Did
Peter?
did we get the green cards?
If we didn't, we will. I'll make sure they'll submit the green cards.
Yeah, I got
No,
it
it was
right
to
away.
Tom Bunker last time, wasn't it? No, it was Mike.
For the record, Seth Wilkinson.
Green card. Yeah,
Mike
green card.
Porcelli
Yeah.
said he was gonna bring them.
We have
We have
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And do you want to know what the quorum is?
Yes, please.
Peter, Steve, Jamie, Mary, Maury, and Kevin again.
All right.
Madam
So,
Chair,
yes.
we had a question about sand versus cobbles. I don't know whether that was, it's just a note I have.
oh, that was discussed, and we can take that up in deliberation when we
Thank you,
talk about the order.
thank you.
All right.
That was all.
Okay, so all those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? So moved. Great. Good night. Thanks for coming.
Compelling arguments
Jim.
notwithstanding.
Oh, you know,
All
what,
right.
we're gonna have to go back.
The 300 Committee Land Trust, care of Alexandra Zolo, 0 Gifford Street, map 38-09-002-002C, Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to replace the boardwalk in the existing footprint and install an educational exhibit panel and associated clearing.
Can we just make a
Do you
motion
wanna
on
do
this one?
yours one first?
No.
Oh, okay.
Any questions?
No, but it's always nice to see Jessica. We don't want to break the run here, right?
We have this paper, we have to do something.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
I have one thing. It's not really our business, but I'm gonna ask that.
I have many of them.
Is that you? There you go.
Go for it.
Oh, Jessica, welcome.
Thank you. There we go. Okay, good evening. I'm Jessica Rittenauer. I'm the Executive Director of the 300 Committee Land Trust. And the project team for the Two Ponds Conservation Area Accessible Boardwalk and Trail Improvement Project includes Holmes and McGrath, our engineer, and Brown Building Company. Doug Brown is our builder. So I'm going to be making some introductory comments about the project and our overarching goals of what we propose to do and what we think the benefits are and why we're doing it. And then I'll turn it over to Mike McGrath to do the engineering plan presentation, and then Doug will make comments about his construction plans. Just a few words about the property itself. It's 14.75 acres. This land is on Gifford Street, adjacent to the Atria Woodbriar facility. So the property was donated to the 300 Committee Land Trust in 2014. The entire 14.75 acres is an open space set aside. It has a conservation restriction on it, but this land was required to be set aside as mitigation for the Atria Woodbriar development. So that's how the property came into our ownership, and that's why the conservation restriction was a requirement of the permitting agencies. The conservation restriction does include reserved rights for replacing the boardwalk. In a later slide, I have aerials that show the boardwalks that were in existence when this area was operated as a 9-hole golf course. So our proposal is to replace those. And of course, to extend the trail system. The deed to the property includes vehicular and public access. We will need to get an agreement in place with Atria to ensure that the construction vehicles can utilize one of the pedestrian accesses. There's actually a roadway there, but we need to make sure that our easement covers temporary construction access. So we're working on that element. It is essentially a landlocked property. We don't have frontage on Gifford Street, but through the access easement, utilize the Atria entrance to get to this property. Just a few photographs to give you a sense of the area. The upper left shows the shoreline of Jones Pond. That is where we propose to install the boardwalks. Upper right just gives you a sense, looking from the existing trail on the property through to the pond. The existing trail in the bottom photo is it's 390 feet long. It was installed by Atria. It is handicap accessible. It's currently utilized primarily by Atria residents, but the property is certainly open to the public. With this project we're working on now, we're hoping to really enhance and expand the public access throughout the whole community, including the disabled community. So I'll speak to that when we get to the boardwalk slides. But there is a small trail system that's been in place since 2014. This here, I don't know, does this, Jen, you were saying this mouse, oh, it does work, okay. So.
I don't think you can see it on the site plans very well.
Right.
but-
So this, the black line with the yellow is the existing trail. So that's the 390-foot-long handicap accessible trail that's already in existence. Our proposal is to put in what we're calling the accessible connector. So that would be a dense grade path that would lead down to the boardwalk area. The boardwalk, as I said, would go along the shoreline of Jones Pond. There'll be an overlook area, and then the boardwalk actually will do an L shape, and it comes along this side of the Atlantic Cedar Swamp. The rest of the trail system would be created by our trail crew. It's not planned to be handicap accessible. It's more of a traditional trail that we would do minimal clearing just to create a footpath. So there are portions handicap accessible, while the majority of the trail system won't be, simply because of the topography. When you're in this area, I'm calling this the upper wetland loop that comes around the side of the cedar swamp and then loops back in to connect. The topography there isn't suitable for accessibility, handicap accessibility. Overall goals of what we propose to do and why: it's replacing and upgrading the boardwalk to allow for handicap access and to minimize disturbance in the resource area. So the proposal includes installing and using technoposts, which Doug will explain how those are installed. They were utilized at T-Ticket Park for that boardwalk, but we have found in wetland areas that it has allowed for minimal disturbance when actually installing the footings. The flow-through light penetration decking was something that the 300 committee felt strongly about including in this proposal, because we thought it would be appropriate given the wetland site conditions. We wanted that type of decking. Expanding the trail system to increase public access opportunities for multiple user groups, including the disabled community. One of our big goals is building educational and outreach opportunities. So we would be including an interpretive panel that has information about the Atlantic White Cedar Swamp and the wetland resources there. We've already done some work building partnerships. Neighborhood Falmouth is a group that we've partnered with for walks on various properties. The Commission on Disabilities, we've engaged with many conversations on how we can continue to make conservation areas more accessible. Partnership with Atria, neighbors, scouts, and schools. There are 3 schools within pretty close proximity to this area, so we really hope that they'll utilize this as an educational resource. And of course, with increasing and expanding public access, we know that our stewardship presence on this land needs to be increased. So that's one of our goals, in ensuring that we're assigning volunteers for land management and for outreach programming here, so that we can introduce the community and really enhance the experience of being on one of our properties that has this unique cedar swamp environment. And a special emphasis on monitoring the conditions of the swamp and the bordering vegetated wetlands, just in terms of getting a better sense of what's there and how it's doing, and what invasives management might need to be done, and then some additional plantings that we may consider over time. Here's our aerial showing 2005, when this was still a 9-hole golf course, and the boardwalk crossing along Jones Pond spans this distance, and then there's a separate boardwalk here. What we're proposing is one continuous boardwalk, and Mike will share those plans. Current conditions, just showing that it's certainly been removed, and the area where the boardwalk would be installed is in the same locations as the previous. Just a very quick overview of how the boardwalk would be situated along the edge of the pond. The location for the interpretive panel will be up here on the trail entrance. The photograph I've included here is a sample of the types of interpretive panels. So this is the Teeticket Park habitat panel, but it would be a similar design, of course, with information relevant to this property. This is through working with a local volunteer and a design company that handles the fabrication for these. The proposed seating area is sort of central on the boardwalk, and as I said, it would loop around and end with the staircase at the upland area. There is an additional area. When McGrath did his most recent wetland delineation, found that the wetlands have expanded. So we looked for options of how to handle this section of the trail. This section of the trail, so here's the staircase at the end of the boardwalk, and then the trail continues on. The initial plans were just to have a cut trail done by volunteers, but we learned now this area is designated as wetland. So what we're proposing, because this section is not required to be accessible, we would install a Bog Bridge system, which the photographs shown here are of the same type of system at Riverbend. We ended up doing that there. It keeps people's feet dry, it protects the wetland, and it guides people where to go. And in this case, it would have to be 100 feet long. But we would propose to work with our volunteers on that aspect of it and have Brown Building Company focusing on the elevated wetland portion, or the elevated boardwalk portion. That concludes my section of the presentation, and Mike McGrath must be in the hallway, so.
Jessica, would you mind loading his plan for him? He does
Yes.
not know how to do that.
Where would I find his?
Oh, it's already, I'll do it.
Okay.
I think they've got,
Mike's?
No, it's already loaded.
Okay. I'll remove the. Let me just take that out.
I'm doing this for you tonight, Mike. Next time you're on your own. Which one do you want, Mike? Clogged pipe exhibit or?
Why don't we start with the clogged pipe exhibit?
Okay. Oops. Brendan? What am I doing? Oh, well, we're just gonna leave it like that.
When we first applied for this, I think you all know that we asked for a continued hearing. And one of the issues was that the ponds were much higher than they ever been. And so the result was that when we went to go stake it, it was all wet, even though it had been upland before. So what I did was, I went down and, with a pitchfork sort of device, and I pulled a log out of the pipe. But it was obvious that it needed to be cleared out, and I obviously can't dig without a permit, but Cape Cod Mosquito Control can. And they, in a couple of weeks, they did come and they did clean it out, and it did take a while for Jones Pond and to drop significantly. So one of the things that happened because of that is we waited a couple of weeks, and then we went out and marked a wetland, and the wetland had grown. So I have some plans.
Of course you do.
Have you seen the rock? It's beautiful.
I'm only half that.
Green cards. Should be green cards.
Your butters cards?
Do you have them though? Okay.
You just could just
As soon
bring
as
them,
you
drop
can.
them off at some point this week, that's fine.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Oh, there's a photocopy of them. You have them, I think.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure that's part of the, yes, there's a photocopy.
Thank you.
That'll do.
I'm not usually the file
Oh.
keeper, so.
When I went down behind the Coonamessett, there was actually a log in the pipe, so I did take the log out, but it was, so, in any case. Now, to the next plan.
Don't X that.
What?
No,
I'm
okay.
impressed.
So the first one,
Mike, you did it.
it's just a click of the mouse. This is an overall plan of the entire site, and in 2014, we permitted the Atria addition. It went through MIPA, it went through the Cape Cod Commission, and there was a very extensive effort made to confirm the wetland lines. We actually had LEC, I believe, was the firm. They did test holes every 30, 40 feet, and it was extensively studied and verified. And we found out in 2018 that the wetland has, even though the pond has dropped, and there's been a sufficient time for the pond to have dropped, it did change the characteristics of the area, and now we have a plant community that seemingly is switching over to be a wetland plant. Oh, any case. How do I get the next page, Jen?
With the little clicker, Mike.
I have it.
You can actually just hit the little,
Down arrow.
Let me see. Oh, let me try this one. So the original, this is a modified, revised portion of the original plan. And there's a boardwalk that's being proposed, and the boardwalk starts out on the Atria parcel, and it, towards the Atria parcel, and there's a path, it's handicap accessible down to the proposed scenic overlook. And then it continues, the elevated walkway is immediately adjacent to the edge of Jones Pond. It then continues down, and it hits a piece of upland. The wetland has grown slightly, so there used to be a set of stairs down and a set of stairs up on the original drawing right there, and now we've changed it so it's continually and it's elevated. Then we came all the way across. The orange line there is where the wetland was in 2014, and green is where it is today. And you can see that that's a significant increase in the extent of the wetland. So this is slightly modified from the original filing in that there was a set of stairs here and a set of stairs here, and now we've connected them because the wetlands grew, and there was not enough space to do the set of stairs down. So then now when we get over, now this is traveling further towards parallel with the boundary, and look at where the orange was, and we had filed for just to construct a path in here. Now we have an issue where the relatively new wetland is here. So we're showing here that this is what's called a bog bridge, with the 300 committee volunteers will construct this, and they lay down there are planks laid down on top of some flat treated timbers that are thick, and they're just laid down on the surface. I don't consider this to have as much wetland value as what is towards the wetland on the orange line, because this is relatively new wetland, but it is a wetland. So this has been, that's the reason we continued this twice, was that, one, we were waiting for it to get low enough that we could get out there, because when we first went to stake this, we were up, over our boots in flooded water. So I believe that this is an entirely appropriate activity. This is going to allow the public to basically have access to a very significant parcel of open space.
Thanks, Mike.
So the base for this would be the Technopost, and I don't know if you remember that we'd use that at T-Ticket Park. It's just a steel column, and it's got a plate on the bottom that's like a screw, and a small handheld machine that you walk behind comes out and screws it into the ground, and it's very little disturbance. You can hardly tell it was there. And then pressure-treated lumber will be cut in the upland, and we'll put tarps down in the cutting area to keep all the dust under control. There's going to be the flow-through panels, so there's very little cutting. Most of those will be installed in full pieces. And we'll use a railing like we used at the bike path bridges. It's a pressure-treated railing, but all that also will be cut in the upland and installed in place. So, do you have any questions about the construction?
Thank you.
Okay.
Steve?
Thank you. So the helix, the posts, you use those in the lowland areas or the wet areas?
Right.
Okay. And the only other question I had was the community access. I think that they're great posts. I think we're using them also at another location that I'll think of in a few seconds.
Yeah.
But if I could ask a question about where the community access is and how people are going to find this, the trailhead.
I think I need to go back. Do you have a site plan of the entire area, Mike? Is that the first one?
What happened to the mouse? Oh, I found it. Oh, yeah, right here.
Okay.
Oh, it doesn't show the
It
Atria
doesn't show.
parking lot.
Okay. So I'll
Well,
try.
they're in shadow or in one of yours.
In one of that I showed?
There is a photo of the parking.
Yeah, one of the original plans, the black and whites, had a shadowed of it, and that's what I was just trying to follow it. Not that I don't know where it is, but
It didn't come through. There is a ghost. If you look
Right.
at the full-size one, there's a ghost.
exactly.
And there are, inside the existing parking lot, there's some dedicated parking spaces
there for the public.
Right, there are 4 parking spaces within the Atria Woodbriar lot, and the signs on those were just updated last week, in fact. And the signs on those 4 spaces say reserved for access to Ponds Conservation Area. So those are dedicated spaces. And then there is a pathway that goes from the parking area that connects to where there's a trailhead and there's an existing kiosk on the Two Ponds Conservation Area. So public access on foot would be from the Atria lot down the path, yeah.
That parking area that Doug just,
Yes,
so from the existing parking area, you walk down the street?
you walk down a pathway that goes along,
Both sides.
yeah.
If you're facing it from the street, you park on the left and you walk around to the left.
All right. The question is the visibility of the access. And then the interpretive piece is, I don't know what that distance is, a couple hundred feet?
Right.
down?
Yeah, it's down the trail. So there's a kiosk at the actual entrance to the Two Ponds Conservation Area that will have a trail map. And then once folks are on the trail and they start to walk down towards the boardwalk, that's where they'll encounter the second, which is the interpretive panel that I showed the example of. That's closer to the boardwalk.
Okay.
So that would be situated, there's a kiosk that would be situated right here that's already in existence, and then I'm sort of backwards looking at these panels. The interpretive panel is proposed for right here. There's a little circle with an X where the interpretive panel would go.
Yes. Yes. I think the plans are wonderful. Unfortunately, I occasionally have questions about how the community's going to access this.
Right.
We just went through a big discussion on Minot Beach about a beach that was acquired and
Yes.
which there is no public access. And I don't want to hear that on this site sometime 2 years from now by a former member of this board, me, or whoever. So I just want to make sure.
Less erosion here.
There'll be less erosion here for sure. I think we could improve, I don't know how you improve, the people's, this is a great location for a passive recreation, for both the Atria and for, I mean, the large medical complex across the street and others who could really encourage the use. Besides, my kids go to Morse Pond, but, you know.
Right.
If they join the 300 committee, they'll get a little map that shows where it is.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
And it will be featured on our website. I do want to point out, too, that we now own property, so the mouse, I hope, is showing, is it? This piece that says now or formerly Lawrence Lynch, and it's situated on the edge of Saul's Pond and has frontage on Gifford Street.
Right.
That is owned by the
I remember you
300
acquired
committee.
that, right.
We acquired that in March. So our sign for the Two Ponds Conservation Area will be on Gifford Street. So the public will at least be able to see on Gifford Street that there's conservation
Well,
land,
that
and then once they get
helps.
to the
That
parking
helps a
lot.
great
So it's
deal.
almost like we need the
You
signage to
can't
lead them
access it
there.
from Gifford or Jones.
Right,
There's-
they have to go through the
There's no
Atria
way
lot.
from Jones, right?
Right,
You can't go through that neighborhood.
yeah, and the
There's-
sign will
they don't-
actually say parking available in Atria lot. So
Okay.
once that is up, that will be a huge help for
All
the
right, sorry to
public.
get off the subject, Madam Chair.
I don't think it's off the subject.
Jen, I didn't mean to jump, Jen.
No, it's okay. We think it's a great
Thank you.
project. We've reviewed it. We've met out on site with Jessica. We're fine. Staff is okay.
Okay.
Oh, you're gonna go down the board, right? Yeah, go down the board.
And of course, it's the cranberry bogs, and I'm thinking of the helixes.
Mark. Peter.
A couple questions. The educational exhibit panels will be encouraging tourists, people from out of town to enjoy this, or is it just for town people?
We would certainly encourage both. I mean, part of what the 300 committee sees and the value of open space preservation is for the community, the people that are here, but also as far as the tourism economy goes. We
Okay.
think open space conservation is a huge part of the quality of life in Falmouth and what attracts visitors here too. So the Chamber of Commerce does have our maps, at their location on Main Street, and a lot of people come in there to get maps of where are the conservation parcels in Falmouth. So we do anticipate visitors from out of town
Okay.
using this space as well.
The next question is, do you have any policy on dogs?
We follow the general town policy, so dogs on leash are allowed on properties. Whenever we get questions from people who want to have their dogs off leash, we can't allow that on our property because it's not consistent with the town's policy. We do get a lot of questions about that.
Okay. And the next question is a construction question. With the timbers used or proposed to be used with galvanized hardware, that's quite different than the old timbers that kind of corroded the
Right.
galvanized hardware. Could you explain that a little
Well,
bit?
the old pressure-treated was carcinogenic, it was chromium and all kinds of chemicals. The new stuff is mostly sodium-based, so we have less of a problem with corrosion.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Great. Jamie?
I just had one question. Is there, and it's to Jessica, probably to be able to answer it. With the conservation restriction on this, was it never allowed to have any parking on this property?
Right. We can't dedicate any part of the 14.75 acres for parking.
And I drive down Gifford Street probably 2 or 3 times, 4 times a week. And I never knew that this land was even there.
Right.
I've never driven into Atria. So it would be nice if there was somehow, with the Lawrence Lynch parcel now, I think people might just be going along and then they might go through the Comm Electric property to get there, I don't know, because that's sort of how it looks like you should get in there. But I really think signage is important.
On Gifford Street.
That people know that it's even here, because when you're a native and you never even knew it was there.
Right. Understood, yeah.
And it is a beautiful gem.
It is.
And in that area, it's a real boon for the people that live around there. It's such a beautiful spot, and a white cedar swamp.
Yeah, the cedar swamp is.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin?
No questions.
Courtney?
I have no questions. It's a good project.
Great project. All right.
I make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Any other questions from the board? Anything from the public? Hearing nothing, all those in favor of closing the hearing say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
See whether it comes up in conditions.
All right. Now we have a request to extend the existing order of conditions for Wigwam Sipawissa Trust, 8 Wigwam Road, West Falmouth. Request to extend the order DEP 25-3590 for 1 year.
Yes, Madam Chairman, the 3590 is set to expire in 4 days, so staff is recommending a 1-year extension.
I make a motion to allow the 1-year extension.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
Mike, did you grab your USB port?
I didn't know how to recheck.
Just grab it.
Do you have it, Mike?
Where the hell is it? Oh, I have it, thank you.
Okay.
Good night, Mike. Request for a certificate of compliance, Brendan Zaldas et al., lots 4 through 11, Pondlet Place and Pierce Place.
Yes, Madam Chairman, this is on the agenda because the project has been completed. They were seeking a certificate of compliance. We've been out there. It has been managed in accordance with the order of condition in the site plan for a number of years. The one portion of this request that the staff could not grant was that the applicants request a COC with specific ongoing conditions that will allow the vegetation management activities to proceed as they have been for the past 9 years without additional permitting. And staff could not make a determination on that. So, I mean, this was a very large vegetation management plan. Mark is here to discuss it, and that's something the staff just could not approve without this board's input.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Thank you. Mark Manganello with LEC Environmental Consultants. I'll give you a little bit of background on this project without going into too much detail, but it was a long, protracted permitting process back in 2009. I think only a couple of you, one or two of you, were on the board at that time. So just by way of orienting you, this is property along the northern shoreline of Salt Pond. Pierce Place and Pondlet Place extend along the shoreline there. The property between the subdivision road and Salt Pond is owned by Salt Pond Area Bird Sanctuaries. The applicant group here, a few of whom are here tonight, own properties on the other side of Pondlet and Pierce Place. And the subdivision was created back in the 70s, I believe, at which time these individual properties were granted view easements over the Salt Pond property. So the project proceeded on Salt Pond Area Bird Sanctuary's property. The applicant sponsored it, the applicants paid for it. Salt Pond Area Bird Sanctuary supported it, and they actually support the project still. We had some interaction with them to make sure they were still satisfied with the way the work has gone. It involved pruning, removal of non-native species, let's see, what else? Mowing, transplanting of certain species, and then it sort of got refined into mowing and pruning each year. So a site plan was submitted with this application. I don't know if you all have that. I have a few extra copies of it here. I wasn't able to.
I don't have
They don't
anything.
have a copy, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, this is kind of a problem, actually. But-
With the COCs in general, or just this one?
Well,
Just this one. This one might have to be continued.
yeah, I mean,
Because this one's been out to even see.
So there's hatching on there that demarcates the type of activities that occurred in each of these corridors. Within the application, we submitted photographs. In fact, the order required monitoring each year over 9 years. So this was a 5-year order of conditions that was extended twice by way of the Permit Extension Act. It was just sort of fortuitous that it happened to occur at a time when those two automatic extensions applied to it. So the activities have gone on for 9 years now with my direct oversight. Bartlett Tree Experts has performed the work each year. I've written a summary report each year and submitted it to the commission. Prior to this order being issued back in 2009, there were complications with the performance of this work that involved the commission and staff on more than one occasion. We went to great lengths to put together a plan that included a lot of specificity with regard to how this work was going to occur, including survey locating the about 99 individual plants within the corridors, documenting their dimensions so that on an annual basis we had a way to instruct the landscapers how to do the work and a way to track the work so that when we reported to the commission and said they've done it in accordance with the plan of record, we had something more than just a vague plan saying you can mow here, you can prune there. It was very specific. And through those 9 years, there were no issues. The project went forward each year. I don't think I saw Jen once about that project, which in this case was a good thing. They've been out to look at it. It looks great. The vegetation there grows at a rate that I have never seen before after the mowing. The wildlife habitat provided by this area is amazing. So what we've asked in this case is for the commission to consider issuing the COC with ongoing conditions that basically continue the old conditions so that the work could just proceed on an annual basis as it has. The commission wouldn't lose any ability to intervene if there was any problem with the work. We would continue with the monitoring reports as we have, so the commission would continue to get a monitoring report every year from me. And, you know, the conditions that were written, there's, I think, 13 conditions that I cite here that are very specific to the way the work should occur, would essentially continue. and it would prevent us from, and from the commission, from having to go through another burdensome notice of intent process for this project, which has been done very well for almost 10 years now.
Madam Chairman, if the board is uncomfortable voting something tonight because you'd like the opportunity to go see it, this permit expires October 2nd. We could always continue it for a week or two. The board can go out, look at the site. I think, Mary, I'm not sure if you were on the board then or Maury.
Wasn't this presented by Spabs the last time? Am I confusing
No,
those?
no,
those
it
things?
wasn't, no. Because I remember all of us going up. Courtney, you were out there. It would be Mary, Maury, and Courtney that were on the board during that time frame.
Yep.
We all
learned
went
a
out
lot
on the
about it.
site. We had a major site visit with the commission. If the newer commissioners want to go out there and look at it, I would suggest, we have the file. It's right here. Look at them all look.
It's all coming, it's coming
Then they're
back.
like, oh, we don't want to review it anymore. You know, I'd say take the time, come in, look at the plan, look at, the work has been done quite well over the years. The staff hasn't had any concerns with it. And if you feel comfortable allowing the work to continue with these conditions, we can write the certificate of compliance that way. Or if you feel more comfortable having it re-permitted, we'll just have the project re-permitted.
Can you just give another 5-year extension?
You could do that if you wanted.
I mean, I remember this project well, and before.
I remember the site visit well.
And I remember how it got to this point. It was basically clear cut constantly, you know, and mowed down, and they did a really nice job putting together that order of conditions with a lot of work from staff. And we all learned an awful lot about stump cutting and basil growth and a lot of
I think I got a
interesting
book out of it by Partly True.
I know.
too.
I have a suggestion.
I mean, an extension would, that
I
would
would
be
like to
appropriate
not
too.
close this tonight.
That's fine.
I
You
think
don't
that
have to
people
vote a
should at least
certificate of
have a
compliance
chance to
tonight.
review,
And go
and
see
look
it.
at the site if they want to, because.
Mark, would an extension be,
Yeah, I think
Some of
with this request, that was
Yeah.
certainly something that we would be
Right.
open to.
I mean, the first I knew this was on the agenda was when I walked in and saw the updated agenda tonight. So, you know, I'm sympathetic to all the people who aren't familiar with this at all.
Yeah, it's a little bit
and-
of an unusual
And I need to refresh my
process.
memory as well. And you mentioned something about 13 conditions. Is that in the file, Jen?
Yes.
Okay. So is that something that would be easy to copy and put in everybody's file folder?
I can email it to everyone.
All right.
I can email the order of conditions to
And
everyone.
then, you know, if you want to come in to the office and look at the file, so we'll have some better basis to think about it. Steve?
What are the goals here? This certificate of compliance, since I know nothing about it, I guess it's going to be hard to get completely up to speed. The goal is to establish some lots or to
I
create
think to
buildable
maintain
lots,
view
or-
easements, is that basically?
Yeah, well, we want to continue with landscaping activities to maintain view easements.
The view easement, it's not buildable lots, Steve, because the
Yeah.
property is owned by Salt Pond Area Bird Sanctuaries. It can't,
Oh.
it's not gonna be built on.
That's
No,
interesting.
no, no,
So
it's
it's like a bunch of
strictly
view
a
corridors,
vista, it's
basically.
basically vista pruning corridors.
Right.
In words that, yeah,
Okay.
almost vista pruning corridors throughout this parcel.
Right.
So
Yeah,
if
there
you-
was a lot of time looking at individual trees.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
there was.
It's not just cut a
No,
window out. There's a
no, no.
lot of care taken to do it in a
Yes.
way that's very careful to the vegetation and the
It's
habitat.
definitely coming back.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Courtney?
So, assuming we issue, we go out and inspect and everything's lovely, and we issue a certificate of compliance, typically that closes the project out, correct?
Correct.
So, what's the, and these folks would like to close it out, but also have permission to go on maintaining, correct?
Correct.
So, what is the mechanism for that?
Just ongoing conditions that
Yes.
the work still continue in accordance with the order of conditions and a monitoring report be
Yeah, it's-
submitted annually.
Procedurally, it's sort of like having a stormwater management plan or something.
Exactly.
Sort of.
Yeah.
I mean,
Maintenance of that stormwater management plan would be an
what the
ongoing
staff can do,
condition.
what the staff can do is I can also contact Pat and see what her opinion would be in this case, if this council would feel more comfortable with an extension for 5 years as opposed to a COC with ongoing conditions. We issue certificates of compliance with ongoing conditions all the time. But I'll check for that until the next time, okay?
Okay, so are we talking about
Do
next
you want the
week?
26th or the 3rd, Mark? When are you available? What's a better option for you?
Neither?
Hmm?
Neither?
Oh.
Neither? Okay, how about,
Well, let me think.
well, it expires on the 7th, but I wouldn't worry about that because you've already put the request in,
Yeah.
so we're fine. We've already started the process, so even if the
Can we
permit
start with the
expired prior.
26th?
Hmm?
Can we start with the 26th? And I have something tentative that night, but I think it's
So
gonna
that's
be-
next week.
That's next week, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that enough time for you all to?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, let's start
You've
with
got your
that.
stuff in by
Okay,
the
and
deadline.
if, yeah, if you,
You don't need anything from me in addition.
well,
Right.
if you have the plans electronically,
Oh, yeah,
send them to us, please.
okay.
That would be easier. And if you could get those over to us tomorrow, that would be great, because then we'll send it right over to the board with the order of conditions.
Yep.
Thank you.
And the management,
I would take
Yeah.
that, no
Whatever.
paperwork at all on
Yeah,
this. I
those
guess you don't
13
either.
things. What's the
Yeah, the
plan?
conditions.
Special
Plan.
conditions,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we'll continue this to the 26th, and then you let me know if that date's gonna work for you. Confirm. Okay.
Okay, so could I have a motion, please?
Put it off for 2 weeks.
I'll make a motion to
Continue.
continue until 9/26 as per the applicant's request.
Second?
Thank you. Any comment or, all right. All those in favor of continuing to September 26th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. So, next we have vote orders of conditions,
Onto that, but I'll show you.
and I am not on quorum for anything, as far as I know.
You wanna take all the business out of order?
So I would ask that the board indulge me because I would like to leave. But I have a
Denied.
quick item that it's just a question I want to ask Jen. And that, I was reminded of it tonight about, remember we were going to ask Pat her, get her opinion on participation and versus non-participation
Yep,
for
I'll
people
send
not
Pat
in
an
the
email.
quorum.
Yep.
Because a couple of us had
I can't
things
go in
we
there.
would have participated in tonight if we had gotten that, that reading from her.
Okay.
So, just to revise them.
I'll do that tomorrow, and I'll also ask her if how she feels more comfortable with issuing a COC with,
Okay, great,
this is, yeah, okay.
thanks. I think I already know what Pat's
I think I know what
opinion
she's
is, but
gonna
I'd like
say,
to get
too.
it, through the proper channels and formally. Okay, so with that, I am going to excuse myself
And turn it over to
and turn it over to
Jamie.
our most distinguished vice chair,
Just
Mr.
stay
Matthews. Thank you all.
All right, first up, order of conditions, Leon and Deborah Gove, 18 Maker Lane, Falmouth, Mass.
Hang on, which one is this?
Oh, that was the one, was it Borselli or Martin, the Maker one?
Yeah, there's 2 on Maker Lane.
Yeah.
This is
just
septic, another
grab my-
septic upgrade.
Yeah, let me grab
And proposed addition above.
Got it.
Hang on, guys.
Madeline.
This was the first.
18 Maker?
Yeah.
All right, my notes. No future expansion. Variances, the Board of Health will put that on.
He's withdrawing the stairs and the footing. He's
Footing.
gonna need a revised plan and letter.
There wasn't very much to this one. It was a good improvement.
Night, Mary. I'm not
I had
quite sure if
nothing
we
on
did
No,
my
you're
that.
notes.
fine. There's a lot more room here than over there.
Do we need a revised plan?
The only thing I would say,
And letter regarding the removal of the stairs.
That was that one week,
Yeah.
same week that Mary was out.
and the only other thing, Jen, that we probably had a little oversight, but you put it in the general order now. He has just silt fence, but this is a pretty steep lot. And there's not gonna be a whole lot of room for excavated material, so,
They can't use a silt sock without our permission. They're
Okay.
not allowed to anymore.
well, he just said silt fence, not even
No,
silt
they're
sock.
not allowed to.
Okay. I know it's all upgrading of the wall,
Hay bales.
upland of the wall,
Okay.
but you know where it's gonna run down,
Yep.
right to the salt marsh. Okay.
So one silt fence and straw.
Hay bales.
Yeah. Straw bales.
Yep.
Susan, for the record, Mark is not on the quorum as well, so
So I make a motion to accept the order as discussed.
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, none. Done. Next up, Charles Crane and Wendy Brewer, 26 Juniper Point Road, Woods Hole, Mass. This is,
What's the quorum on this one?
All you guys.
proposed additions with mitigation plantings. And
Tim Santos represented this one, right?
yeah,
That's the plan.
pretty cut and dry.
I didn't have any notes on mine, amazing.
Slacking.
I'm slacking. Well, they were all answered.
Ready, make a motion?
Go for it.
No, they were using the former greenhouse as coverage.
Right.
Yeah, it was fun.
That was an easy one.
That was an easy one. Just basically your regular standard and regular special conditions.
So Steve made a motion to accept, and I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Do all Jennifer at the same time?
Next up, Bernard and Janet Azarkoff, lots 131 and 132, Coonamessett Circle, Falmouth, Mass.
That one was the restoration plan on the association's property, and there was some discussion about the mulch area,
Right.
Yeah, to reduce it.
to reduce the mulch area.
The boundary line issue.
So I don't know how you wanna do that. We have the bearberry. What do you wanna do with the mulch area, guys?
No, that was a tough one, because they've already encroached on the,
Undefined property line.
yeah, the undefined
Common
property,
ownership.
yeah. But, my only concern is, I know what happens to mulch. It gets treated. You know, they spray it. Most people don't hand weed, they just go out there and they round it up. So, I don't know,
We could ask them about moving some of the mitigation, no?
we did, remember the young lady that represented for the landscape architect? Because we had, it's most of it's all low bush blueberry, because it's a pretty well-established bank.
Yeah, pond front.
Yeah, I mean, unless we could, I don't know how we would condition it, because you know, if we say, let the bearberry just expand and stop mulching, it would eventually. Bearberry doesn't really like to expand and mulch, because it's not native and it gets almost impervious and hydrophobic, so the roots can't even go down. So, but we're not gonna be able to condition it. I mean, we can condition it, but it's not gonna happen.
So hence, should we make a motion to accept?
The restoration plan as proposed.
Yeah, second.
There, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Next up, Thomas Dimitrick, 53 Madeline Road, East Falmouth, Mass.
That's the dock.
That's the hydro hoist in the dock.
Oh, yeah, okay. Something about using stainless steel hardware?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, stainless steel hardware, and now you guys have to discuss
The shellfish survey.
the shellfish survey.
My only concern, as I stated at the beginning, was, and I'm not saying that there is not, I mean, that Chuck was wrong saying that there's no shellfish there. I just feel that if that's how we go down that slippery slope, people are just gonna say, hey, I just talked to Chuck, he came out and made 4 pulls with a bull rake, and he didn't find anything. And then we'll start to accept that. Well, I
No, you
don't,
shouldn't, because
We
this
shouldn't.
application was incomplete. I
that's
mean,
what I'm
they-
saying. So
They
I,
should have had the shellfish survey done.
Can we
and,
just make that a
so
condition?
I'm
You
gonna.
can make it, so if the board wants to condition the shellfish survey, you condition the shellfish survey, and they have to submit the shellfish survey prior to constructing the dock, and if the shellfish survey proves that it trips the threshold of the,
I think we should do that,
shellfish,
so we don't set a
they're going to
precedent.
have to
That's what
come
I'm-
back to us.
Yeah, that's what that was where I was headed, that there probably is no, I don't know. I
This
really
is an
don't know.
expansion of the dock, and the
a
applicant's
huge
representative is well aware that they needed,
This is
that any
10,
expansion of a dock requires a shellfish survey.
I mean, the lift itself is almost 4 times an expansion of the existing dock. And then the new pier is probably half again an expansion of the dock. So it is substantial. It wasn't as if they were just putting a T, and they are improving the situation there by getting that existing flow out into deeper water so the boat is not causing any turbidity and prop wash. Now the lift is, and this might, I mean, the harbor master had concerns with it narrowing that channel.
Yes.
And that concerns me because that salt marsh is so, I mean, it's not that far away.
It pushes them that much closer.
It pushes them that much closer. So the shellfish survey, I think, would be prudent, just so that we do not set a precedent that we are going to pay dearly for later on.
Right.
So I make a motion to,
Oh, and then you wanna make it a condition that the existing float be removed.
yes,
And that the boat be out in the winter, but I
Yes.
think that's highly likely anyway. Are we going to require stainless steel?
I don't think so.
I don't know if we can.
I don't know.
This came up once before.
the thing is hot dip galvanized, I mean, it all depends. I mean, then you'd have to figure out which stainless you want, because, as you
Yeah.
know, some stainlesses are worse than hot dip galvanized, because they're, what is it, you know it,
Don't
Jamie, what's the,
remind me.
the good one? The good
Yeah,
stainless?
you want 30, what is this,
Yes.
304 or 3?
Something,
Yeah.
the good stainless, I don't know.
The thing is that, I mean, that's, one, it's methodology. Two, the galvanized material is different than what it used to be, and the pressure treat is different than what it used to be.
Right.
So the reaction isn't as severe. I'm not disagreeing, I'm just saying that it's not quite what it used to be. And then can we condition methodology?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not,
I mean, I don't think they're gonna,
I don't
it
think
didn't
they're
sound
gonna
like
do.
there was gonna be a lot of heartburn if we did require it.
well, the odds of it breaking down, it's not gonna break down tomorrow, you're right. But what I'm looking at is that requiring stainless steel hardware is an extra insurance thing for those folks. I mean, because to start repairing something because the stuff fails is gonna create more of a hazard than if it goes. And as I said in the hearing, when you're looking at the scope of the project and the amount of cost involved to construct it, putting stainless steel hardware versus galvanized is peanuts.
Well, it's $7 a unit more.
Huh?
$7 a unit more. For every unit, every appliance, yes.
Yeah, but what does the whole project cost?
Well, we just approved or considered the 300 committee with galvanized.
And
I'd like to be consistent.
the
Although
builder
I think-
explained,
That's fresh water too, so.
yeah, but it's continually
That's true.
wet. It's wetland.
And, I mean, frankly, I'm not gonna follow my sword on this. If you guys feel that it's okay and that I'm overanalyzing it, that's fine.
I'm comfortable with galvanized, but I don't,
I'm comfortable with galvanized.
I'm comfortable with not getting too far into what somebody can do or can't
The
do.
methodology part.
So scratch stainless steel? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right, so you have the shellfish survey, no winter storage on the lift if the shellfish survey allows the dock to go forward, and then remove existing float. Correct? Okay.
I had an issue on the new water and electric line, but it seems irrelevant. That's the only disturbance of the.
Yeah, that's fine, we have, yeah,
We usually make them seasonal.
yeah, they must
They're
seasonal
seasonal
lines.
No, I
lines,
mean,
so
they
that-
have an existing water pipe and electric line. And they want to leave it? Should we require them to leave the existing line in place? No? I'm just trying to reduce the
I
disturbance.
agree, yeah, the disturbance.
We
I don't
can
even know
leave
why
the
they're, why are they putting new in? He didn't really explain that.
I think the other, it's probably has a minimal service
Life.
at this
Yeah.
time, yes. And it's in the wrong place.
All right, then let's leave it in place, so he's not digging that out.
Okay,
All right, not to be too much of a,
But it is a runoff issue.
Yeah.
Right,
why dig another hole?
so I make a motion to accept as discussed.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Thank you for indulging, Mr.
And before we
Chairman.
close, I would like to make one comment. Did you see that dock that we, the people that, remember that one where they wanted the finger pier out and they were gonna inhibit everybody else?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, did you see
They
that?
didn't win. The selectmen turned them down,
Yes.
so they did not get that dock.
It's a different
Yes, I know.
location.
One
okay, we can
selectman-
discuss that afterwards, close
Okay,
this.
close the
and then-
hearing.
Okay.
All right, adjourn. I make a motion.
No, you
Oh,
can
oh.
adjourn. You still got two more.
Oh, I might not have been on those.
I'll check.
Oh, why don't I have my paperwork?
You don't wanna hang out?
No,
Bradley
Maureen's
and
not
Lotus-
on Maker Lane, and she's not on Sunfish.
Pardon me.
Congratulations.
You, I'm blonde, but I
Hang on,
catch on
hang
once
on,
in a
hang
while.
on, hang on.
Well, I didn't have my
Peter,
papers.
Steve, Jamie, Courtney, Kevin's on Maker. Peter, Steve, Jamie, Courtney, Kevin is on Sunfish. You're out of here, lady.
Well, I don't have to run. I just knew I wasn't on those. And Jenny,
May
I'll
I?
leave this in the file for you.
Bradley and Elizabeth Weiner, 14 Maker Lane, Falmouth,
That was the
Mass.
septic upgrade that they came back after they had Batella go out and look at it.
They came back several times with revisions.
I really just want them to make sure that they put all the plantings back, cause where they're putting down so the tank's in the back, so they have to connect it to the leach field. All those plantings in there were mitigation plantings, so we do need to require that those be replaced.
Okay,
And they changed it to 2 tanks to make it,
Yep,
right. So the other conditions that we're notifying abutters if there's a road blockage, you have all that stuff? There's 5 feet from the abutting property line.
hang on, Steve.
These are things that they agreed to in the second or third iteration of this
Yeah,
presentation.
I think that tree,
This is just a
it
real
was the
estate
tree,
deal.
right? The tree issue on the property line? Okay,
There's a 22-inch oak and 15-inch
they're,
oak.
yeah, but they're not
But I
gonna,
think
they're
they moved
gonna
that.
leave those.
They moved the
They're gonna-
tank.
Yeah.
They moved the tank, they resolved the issue. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that they maintain the 5-foot
Yeah,
separation from the abutter, who was very concerned.
and then you want me to put in a condition, notify butters of construction?
But we had asked them that. that they would, I mean, it's kind of a courtesy, it's kind of a
They're gonna have to block the road.
site management type thing, that the day that they do
The only thing up there is 18, though. There's only one
No,
more
there's
house.
one more around the
it's more of a
corner.
courtesy than anything, so.
Yeah, they can't block that road.
I think there's one more around the
People
corner.
live further down.
How about I notify abutters of a construction schedule?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Not a problem.
I'd make a motion to accept as discussed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Lastly,
My notes are getting better.
Peter and Ann Brundrett, 27 Sunfish Lane, East Falmouth.
It's a big house on Crooked Pond. After they revised the plan, I don't think I had any,
It was just the condition that they have to do everything from Sunfish.
yep,
Correct.
They can't come in from Gagat. But they have to leave the Gagat open for access to utilities?
no, they're closing it with mitigation.
No, I mean, it has to be in such a way that they can get to that light pole.
They can get to the light pole around the
Right.
house, that's what they were saying, that's why they wanted the lawn, that lawn area around the house, is so they can get to that light pole. They're not coming in through Jagat anymore. That's being blocked off. Am I right, Jamie?
I believe that is
Yeah,
accurate.
that's why they had,
I don't
look
think
at the
they can
site
get to that
plan, yeah.
pole any other way than coming up that right away.
Remember I asked, they wanted a 4-foot wide path through the mitigation plantings, and I asked why? Nobody ever asked for a 4-foot wide path through
Right,
their
right, right.
mitigation plantings, so that's gonna be, do you want to allow that or not?
They
There's
were
no reason
going
for
to
it.
move pole. One of the poles.
One of
was-
the poles is
yeah.
gonna move, yeah.
Hmm.
Okay.
And then all the standard stuff.
All right, so no path through mitigation, construction access through Sunfish.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. I'm pretty sure that's what they said, because they were leaving that area kind of open and not putting the mitigation plantings around there so they could get around the house to access that pole right there.
Yeah, because there's an easement for that. So
Right.
there's
Do you want to see the
requirements.
plan, Steve?
No,
You like
no,
looking
no,
up
I have,
like you're
I
trying
have
to remember
both
the
plans.
plan? Okay. Maury, are you waiting for something?
The
Oh.
road's not gonna get close enough to the pole.
Yep.
All right, we have a
Okay.
motion?
I made a motion to accept as discussed.
Second.
I thought.
Okay.
Did you?
Huh? No, no, no.
Okay.
Who has an elastic?
So we need,
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes.
Second.
Okay,
Whatever.
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None.
Move to adjourn. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Stick around.
One's yours.